Yeah. Oh.
There. Okay. Now I'm recording. I'm going to start recording, but we'll give it just a minute or two so that people can keep coming in. If you could mute yourselves as you come in, I appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. Boy, Frida, you did invite a lot of people. Yay!
Yeah, aren't you happy? More are going to come in, okay?
That's fine. Keep them coming. Keep them coming.
Yep.
Makes it better and better. I know. Thank you. All right, we're just going to give it a couple of minutes. So everybody just hold on and ask, because I want everybody to be able to catch everything. And welcome to everyone. And just for some information, the research symposium will take a break in the summer, and then we will resume in the fall and have other speakers come in too. So, and other topics. Well, may I present Dr. Bob Wubbolding and Dr. Willa Cass-Stevens as our hosts today. They're going to be giving a talk on evidence-based research and all the details about it. And I have been honored and thrilled to have them with us today because their topic is very, very important for everyone. And I learned so much from them both because they truly are the people to learn from. So thank you very much for hosting today. And thank you for joining us today. So Will and Bob, you can take the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this very important material. If I were to write one objective, which we need to do when we make presentations at professional organizations, I would say the objective that I hope would be implemented is that everyone would get one idea that they would be willing to implement in some way on the job or in their career. Okay. So anyway, I have been with the Institute for a long time, and I will, I think everybody knows my name and probably a little about me. So I'll just introduce Willa Cass-Stevens, who is a scholar of research, and I don't know anybody who exceeds her in her knowledge of research and evidence-based research and what it is. She is a professor at Buena Vista University. So Willa, why don't you tell us a little more about yourself?
Well, thank you, Bob. I appreciate that, and I'm honored to be here, and it's great to see everybody this morning. I think that's a little overboard, but thank you for the introduction. I am a Glasser Scholar, and I just recently got my basic instructor certification, which was wonderful. And I've been an academic now about 15 years. 13 of those were with NC State, which is a research intensive university in North Carolina. And then I was able to get a position at Buena Vista University in Storm Lake, Iowa, and it is much nearer family and in a location and with people who are near and dear to my heart. So I made the move 2 years ago, and I'm now program director here of the social work program. And thank you so much, Bob, for inviting me to co-present with you. That was truly an honor.
I must say that when we were talking on Zoom a couple of times, I learned a lot as I listened to Willa. So we'll jump into this and start talking about it. I want to provide a little background and attribute our work and our ideas to Dr. Glasser. And I want to say something about his legacy, what he left us and what he left the world. He left the world something happened here. A theory. Can you see me? Well, my screen just went weird.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
yes, we can see you.
It left us a theory. He adapted control system theory to education and therapy and counseling, and he called it choice theory because of the emphasis on choice. He also left a practice, the reality therapy. He said the theory is choice theory and the practice is reality therapy. The relationship is that of like a train to the train track. Theory is the train, theory is the track and the practice is the train. So that's an analogy that he came up with. We apply it to counseling, to education, and so on. Third element of his legacy, I believe, is an organization he left us, a national and an international organization. And these two combine and are always developing new programs as well as policies and rules which continually change and are adapted to the current situation, whatever it may be. And the fourth component is, I believe, a process. He continually changed his ideas, and that kind of has filtered into our work, where we continue to develop his ideas and to expand them. So I think those are four rather major contributions, and a journal. When I travel around and make presentations at conferences and I describe these elements of his legacy, people are quite impressed, and they are quite impressed when they hear there is a professional journal. What we need more of is what we're talking about here today, which is research. And this would and has provided another leg of in our table of offerings that we give to the world. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is the need for evidence-based research or evidence-informed research. We will talk about that terminology too. Okay, so that's all I want to say by way of introduction to put this hour in context. Okay, we're ready for the beginning here, slides. There we are, evidence-based, evidence-informed, evidence-supported. What's the difference, and do we care? Okay. And the next one is a statement by Cook and Schwartz and Caslow. By the way, you will get a bibliography, a list of references. So one misconception of evidence-based is that it has to always have a randomized controlled study. Now, this is a very, I believe, somewhat at least controversial topic. And Willa will talk about the gold standard later on, which is randomized controlled studies. And if you have those, you're in a field by yourself. So we're hoping that we will get at least one of those in years and months to come. So it is up to the individual counselor to ensure that his or her practice is based on data. We'll talk a lot about that as we go along. Okay.
Okay, and here's that
Here we are.
gold
Okay.
standard that Bob mentioned. Evidence-based practice is actually along a continuum, and there's a hierarchy of evidence involved with any evidence-based practice. That gold standard is the randomized controlled trials, which usually have 100 to 200 participants. There's randomization and excellent data that you can collect from that sort of structure, that sort of research design. Quasi-experimental studies are also very strong, depending on how one constructs them and how well they're put together. Correlational studies are sort of in the middle there. And then qualitative studies and case studies are definitely in the hierarchy of evidence. They tend to be, well, they are towards the bottom of it, if I can put it that way, if we think of it as a, in that way. Reality therapy, for example, has case studies and qualitative research out there. I have not seen any quasi-experimental studies or randomized controlled trials, at least in the English literature, but other folks may be aware of them, okay? So we are definitely in an evidence-based practice category that could be described as promising, but we got a ways to go.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, this is the American Psychological Association's definition of evidence-based practice. And that was done about, well, heck, 15 years ago now. It's a very basic approach or view of it. However, there are other views. And I don't think we need to read the slides, do we, Bob? I mean, people can.
Well, we can
Or do you want
summarize
to?
it, but
Okay.
I think
Well,
we did violate the basic rule for PowerPoint, and that is keep it simple. Don't put a lot on the slides. So we do have a couple where there is, in fact, the one prior to this had really too much on it, but we want to be on record as quoting the authorities on this and quoting sources so that you have those if you decide you want to get a copy of these this PowerPoint. So we have an excuse.
Thank you, Bob. This is actually a visual of what that APA definition showed us, that the best research evidence, clinical expertise, and patient values and preferences all go into evidence-based practice.
This is from a man named Sachet, S-A-C-H-E-T, and you can Google him, and he is sort of the father of many of the ideas built around evidence-based, and he is a physician, and this is, of course, where it started, the emphasis on the need for evidence-based. And so he said the patient values and preferences, we have a way of getting at that with our system called reality therapy. We're very strong on that. I think we're very strong on a clinical expertise because of our training program. So we can look to that and say, we have two of the three that are required for evidence-based. And the third one on the lower left, we need more research and better research. While I think of it, I'd like to mention one study that is very convincing, and that's Leon Loic's study in Slovenia, where he did a follow-up study of the prisoners' residents of a halfway house. And the results were so strong that the funders didn't believe the results. And they had to go back and prove the results to the funding board or whoever it was. And so it's a very strong study on this. It's like a 12-year follow-up. And so I think we ought to know about that and promote that particular study. Now, it's not a controlled study, but it is very convincing. Okay, so.
And this diagram shows a slightly more, well, rather more complex presentation on how we go about decision-making with evidence-informed practice. And this is actually talking about evidence-informed practice. We'll get to the distinction there in a bit. So as you can see, there's the organizational context, the community context, the cultural context, and the policy context that we all have to take into consideration when we're choosing an intervention and trying to make a decision on what intervention to use with clients. We consider theory, empirical evidence, the client needs and preferences, and practitioner wisdom or expertise. So all of this goes into that selection of an evidence-based practice.
I'd like to comment on the cultural context. This seems to me to be receiving a great deal of emphasis in the professions, because a few years ago, there was some opinion, I call it opinion, that the westernized counseling theories do not apply either to minority groups in the West or to other cultural groups. And I always say, don't believe a word of that, because you take the Ericksonian Institute, for example, they have 135 institutes around the world. And Milton Erickson was a psychiatrist who lived in Phoenix, Arizona. I don't think he ever traveled outside the country, but so that's an example of the widespread applicability. But each person in any culture needs to apply it to the individual person or persons we're dealing with. And I always say that the culture and the people from the cultures are the ones that who adapt it. They're the ones who really apply it. And they're the ones who can testify whether or not it is applicable in their particular respective worlds. What, you were going to say something, Willa?
No, I thought you froze there, but I think my internet connection may be unstable. So let me apologize if something goes a little odd with that.
Okay.
Okay.
I can hear you fine.
Great. Okay.
Okay. Let me give another example of the cultural application. I've been to Japan many times and Korea many times and other places. And they testify that the ideas are completely applicable. And I'm not saying millions of people have heard about them, but enough people have heard as to give the cross-cultural application quite a bit of credibility. So I just want to say that. And I just gave a presentation to the Korean Counseling Association, their meeting the other day, and there were a couple thousand people at that. And I found that out after the conference. And I'm glad I found it out, because I would have been a little more nervous if I'd known there were that many people. But but they believe it's applicable. So I just think that's an issue that we need to be aware of. I mean, we take it for granted, those of us who are involved in this organization, that we can take that for granted because we have the experience. Okay.
Language has changed over time, and this is true with the evidence-based practice. I mentioned that the previous slide showed us evidence-informed practice. In the 1990s, as Bob already said, Sackett helped make evidence-based practice that hot topic in medicine. Other helping professions soon followed. So it moved over to education, nursing, public health, social work, counseling. We can go down the line. Evidence-based practices and evidence-informed practice were originally used as different terms for essentially the same constructs. And that was true even a decade ago. Later, and actually what we're talking about is very recently, they've begun to be defined very differently. And that started probably with Epstein in 2009, and it's certainly continued. So taking a look at this, evidence-informed practice, if you look at this definition, it looks very similar to how the American Psychological Association has defined evidence-based practice, right? Back in 2006. So it's important to take note that if you're actually looking at the scholarly literature on this, you may find these terms used interchangeably depending on when and where the article is coming from, okay? Some professions will use them interchangeably, others make a distinction. Um, the evidence-informed practice cycle is something also that we need to be aware of. And we determine the issue, you know, the presenting problem for our client. We look at our assessment and think about practice implications. I'm having trouble talking this morning. And then we go ahead and implement the selected intervention and review and reformulate if we need to. Okay, so this is a cycle. If I was better at generating slides, I could have given you a picture instead of put it into a hierarchy, but I hope it comes across. And this, we've got the source there, it's Petch. It's about a dozen years old now. And then moving on to reality therapy.
Okay, well, as we said earlier, we do have the expertise, a training program with which we tap the client values and preferences to use the language of the evidence-based people. The European Association of Psychotherapy has endorsed and re-endorsed reality therapy, and I think that is really quite a compliment, because there are 125,000 members in that EAP, they call it. That doesn't mean Employee Assistance Program. It means European Association of Psychotherapy. And they are different than the professional organizations in this country. The professional organizations in this country don't endorse specific systems, except by way of implication if they publish a book or something that may be an indirect endorsement, but they don't come out and say this theory is something that we are endorsing. But yet the European Association does say that. So that is really quite an endorsement. And the people who worked behind that, especially were Leon and Boba Loic, and people from Ireland and from United Kingdom. And there was quite a number, and a few people here who indirectly assisted also. The book, that I'm very proud of this book, because on the cover, now this is not evidence-based, but it points toward credibility. And on the cover, they even put reality therapy, and they said in there that somewhere in there, the book, they said the theories they suggested have credibility and they believe are quite strong in their application and in their acceptance in the professional world. But I like this one statement here: even if you are, see the third line from the bottom, where right above the word weak. Even if you are developing the skill and the knowledge needed to form a judgment, you should feel at ease moving forward in your study of the theoretical approaches covered in this book. In other words, you don't have to have, excuse me, the highest level skill possible. You're still learning it, and they should feel at ease. The readers should feel at ease in using the approaches, which I thought was a very interesting statement by Tony Tinsley and the other editors of that book. It's quite complimentary toward reality therapy also. I'm very proud of that chapter.
Zastro is,
why?
Bob, Zastro is a noted textbook writer for social work and also includes choice theory in a number of his chapters. When he's
What's the name?
Zastro. I mean, he writes with a number of people, but
Yeah.
he'd be the lead author.
Good, good. Okay. We're strong in many ways, but we're weak. That's not probably the best word. We need improvement. I guess that would be better. And with the randomized controlled studies and quasi-experimental, which we have already alluded to. Wow, look at, she's going to make an an improvement already. Okay, thank you. We do have much research which people don't really know about, but the studies are written in various books and in our journal. We're very fortunate to have a journal. And Rose Inza Kim in Korea said she has hundreds of studies, master's theses and doctoral dissertations on reality therapy and choice theory. And I've begged her to get those translated into English, and a couple of them are, but we need to see that on a more worldwide basis, I think. But that's just one opinion. Okay. Therapeutic Alliance.
And research has actually shown that the therapeutic alliance has more to do with the success of therapy in terms of outcomes than the type of approach or the model of therapy selected for use. So this is something that reality therapy is particularly strong in.
The Therapeutic Alliance, if you use this chart, it's on here, right here. It's made up of three elements. One is the relationship, and one is mutually agreed upon goals. In other words, you sit with the person and say, what do you want to work on? And mutually agreed upon strategies. Now for reality therapy, that's a natural, that fits quite nicely, that therapeutic alliance. And by the way, this just came out. It's called, the whole book is on therapeutic alliance. The guy really squeezed a lot out of that concept. And he's got research studies and so on. Gary Forrest, who's from Colorado Springs in Colorado. And so that's a resource if you're interested in that. So it is central to the effect, as Willis said. As Willis said, the therapeutic system is secondary. In fact, there is evidence that all systems work. I have a resource here somewhere. One of the authors said all the systems work, and I thought that was kind of interesting. So. But naturally, one is better than the others. I didn't say that. I don't hear anybody laughing. Okay.
How do we define and use terms now? So I'm just looking at this slide and how we define and use terms now. It's important to consider evidence-informed practice refers to intervention models that have been assessed using at least some systematic empirical inquiry and have shown positive results. Reality therapy definitely qualifies as evidence-informed practice. Evidence-based practice these days is considered to have specifically designed criteria for evidence and usually includes at least one randomized clinical trial that yields favorable results, and that we're still waiting on, at least unless one of Rose's doctoral students, completed a large randomized study. That would be wonderful if it's sitting there in the available and to be translated. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
And then a more recent term that started being used, or at least as far as I know, it's more recent, evidence-supported interventions. And again, these have been demonstrated to be effective, preferably via a randomized clinical trial or at least a systematic review of the research literature. So those are sort of the three categories, can I say, maybe, Bob, that we're looking at here.
Yeah, the terms are pretty loosely used, except for evidence-based, it seems to me, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, loosely in the sense that they're you can say, you can pretty much define the other two pretty almost with the same definition, wouldn't you say?
Well, evidence-based and evidence-supported want that
Not
randomized.
evidence-based. I meant evidence-supported and evidence-informed. I mean, they're pretty close, aren't they?
Well, the randomized clinical trial is something that evidence-supported generally has,
Okay.
or a systematic review. Evidence-informed, sometimes that is simply that the agency that uses them has been collecting data and analyzing their data. And that's certainly a process by which you can use evidence to inform a practice. There are some pitfalls that can be involved with it, but it's not quite the same as a published peer-reviewed research study would be.
Okay.
And then additional considerations, quality schools. Bob, take it away.
Okay. This is a favorite topic of mine. And that is that, to me, it seems that there should be a requirement that the quality school, that the school seeking to become a Glasser quality school have a component of evaluation or research written into the plan from the very beginning. And I know there's talk of that, and I think that will happen because, you know, how do you know you got quality if you don't measure it, if you don't have some evidence of it? And so it's not just otherwise it sounds like a feel-good program. And although feel-good might be important, my thought is always, how does the public see this and how do people outside of this institute see it? And we need to be able to present to them data, evidence that something happened when they declare that they're a quality school, a Glasser quality school. So, and we need to ask, is the program for the school building? Or is it for a system, a system-wide program for the classroom, for relationships, for individual class lessons, and etc. So a little bit more about that later on, but maybe what we could do is allow time for some questions and comments and disagreements and whatever people want to say right now before we move on.
Would you like me to stop the screen
Do what?
Q&A?
Yes, yes.
So my question would be, we can say that reality therapy is an evidence-informed practice then, but not evidence-based or evidence-supported?
It would seem that way. Willow, what do you think?
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. Could you say that again, Mike? Was that?
Yes. So we could say that reality therapy is an evidence-informed practice, but it's not evidence-based, nor is it evidence-supported.
Yeah, it's definitely evidence informed, and certainly it's supported by evidence. But if we're talking in the technical sense, yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be evidence
Just to be safe, you know, it's more than just words, and we just want to be safe.
And I'm sorry, I was looking at the chats. I see a couple of requests to go into presentation mode, and I did not get those chats. I'm so sorry. We will send out the slides. I think, Janet, you said you'd do that for us early next week. I didn't realize they weren't clear.
Any other questions, or how about some disagreements?
Or little more clarification on the difference between evidence-based practice and evidence-supported intervention. On my notes, I've got evidence-based practice. It has one randomized clinical trial, and then evidence-supported has randomized clinical trials or systematic review.
Yes.
So evidence is evidence-based, I guess, which is the
Evidence-based practice actually is on a hierarchy.
mhm,
And so the top of the line would have those randomized controlled trials,
mhm,
that gold standard research, you know, and probably at quasi-experimental studies leading up to that.
mhm,
However, the National Registry of Evidence-Based Practices and Programs in the US was willing to give reality therapy promising, okay, as a promising intervention because of the existence of case studies and the qualitative research that's out there. So it's evidence-based practice exists on a continuum. And that ideal would be to get to the randomized control trials stage of the game. But that's going to take us, I think, more work. Those are usually more expensive trials to run as well, because you usually have 100 to 200 people participating. And you need to be able to structure things so that you have a control group that's meaningful. I don't know, Mike, did that answer the question?
yes, I'm just, yes, it's helping. So evidence-based practice would be our ultimate goal. Right now, we're evidence informed, and the next step would be evidence supported, then evidence-based, or
Evidence-supported interventions is actually a term that at least I've only recently encountered in the literature, keeping in mind I'm a social worker. So
जो एक मानस आपसे तेना बाल जो मस्त लागे कलर में
I'm
आवे
sorry.
तारे देखा आई नहीं आवे तारे आई तो आना गोल्डन एक भी जो मानस जो है आवे तो
I don't know if somebody's not muted maybe, or if somebody could put that in English for me.
नहीं देखा हाँ 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 आया हाँ लागेच ने मजे ना लागेच
Okay, I'm sorry, Mike, I lost the thread on that.
okay.
Evidence supported is a term I've just recently seen in the literature, but it may be more common in other disciplines. We tend to be siloed in terms of the counseling literature, the psychology literature, the social work literature, the medical literature, although there's a great deal of overlap about needs and, you know, interventions that we're using, especially with the first three. I'm not sure, well, I have not seen systematic reviews of the material that's out there on reality therapy. I think that would be difficult to do in a comprehensive way because we are publishing in so many languages. And it would be lovely to see that happen, you know, for that crossover to be able to occur. I think it's going to take some more work.
Yeah, that's, I can see a clear distinction between evidence informed and evidence based. It was just a little less clear with evidence supported and evidence based, but what I'm gathering is with evidence based, there's going to need to be that at least one randomly controlled clinical trial. With evidence supported, there could be a random clinical trial or a systematic review.
Yes, exactly. Mhm.
Thank
At
you.
least that's my understanding of it. Please feel free to disagree. This is,
That
you know,
it makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you.
The
I can
literature is a
explain.
little muddy on this.
Mhm.
It really is. And yeah. Any other questions, comments?
I wonder if there are additional reasons why clinical research isn't taking place. I come from mostly a school background, and what I see as a real key for success in school is a need satisfying environment. And for me, there's a question about operationalizing the basic need terms. And I keep running into this in my own attempts to do research in schools. For instance, power and competence and significance. It needs, in my opinion, to have some sort of operationalized common language in order to do significant research in this area.
I agree with you. And operationalizing the terms is something that I'd love to see us work on. Yeah, I think we absolutely have to know what we're measuring to measure it. And that would be an absolutely marvelous start. Yeah. Mhm.
So when do we start?
Well, that's well, the research committee might want to tackle that in the fall. I don't know if Scott is actually making that proposal, but it would be, I think, a wonderful thing if we were able to at least propose some. I mean, other people may then modify them, but it would be nice to be able to come out with sort of some proposed.
That would be our first step, correct?
Yeah.
I wonder if we can't start from the other end of that and start by saying, what do we want this school to look like? What activities, for example, what behaviors, and then fit those behaviors a bit artificially and subjectively into the need categories. I mean, I think we need to start with what do we want this school to look like, rather than saying talking about the needs. That seems to me to come. It could come at the end.
And those would be two different approaches to research. One would be looking at the outcome research and say maybe what parents would like to be seeing children's academic achievements or maybe just comprehensive achievements during that developmental stage look like, right? The outcomes. And then the other would be the process, how the theory actually tracks and integrates with the outcomes. So they're both viable approaches to research, and they're both important. Absolutely.
I can tell my story another time. I think will be scheduled for that. But in my efforts to use Glasser terminology in my dissertation, it was turned down.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how many dissertations are being lost because we can't use terms that would fit a research committee's expectations.
What terms did you were turned down?
Specifically, the term for power and competence I was looking at.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't a quantifiable enough term. To be used for that level of research.
Yes, and this is why we've got to work towards that. I really think it's important because we want to establish the theoretical credibility as well as the outcome efficacy, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Unless they're defined, you can't. Yeah.
You can't measure what's not defined.
You can't measure it. Yeah. If you have no definition, how do you know you hit the mark? So, right.
Yeah. And Mike just brought up an excellent point in the chat, which I can now see. I couldn't do that when the slides were showing. That NREP has been, is no longer, I think we can access what's already there, but it's no longer accepting new applications and so forth. Right. And that happened about 3 years ago now. Is that right, Mike?
That's right.
Yeah. So basically,
we were working on getting reality therapy as evidence-based intervention, and we did all this work, and I thought we had it, and then we kind of had the rug pulled out from under us at the last moment.
Well, it would have been wonderful if we'd been able to get on board as a promising practice, but I guess that didn't happen. The thing is, I don't think we have a board, at least I don't know of a board that's trying to adjudicate this. It really is a becoming familiar with the sort of breadth of the scholarly literature, what's being said about it, and so forth, and what is out there on whatever approach that you're interested in using. Which is why I would love to see some of those Korean dissertations translated to English if Rose has got some that are even quasi-experimental. So it's, it really is a matter, I guess, these days, I would say, of scholarly or academic consensus in terms of the way the terms are applied. If you're asking, how do we know if reality therapy meets that benchmark?
But I still think we go back to Scott's point. Unless we have them operationalized, we will not be able to say, yes, this is it. So
Well,
that's our first thing.
Yeah, the
And
word power covers everything.
we're coming to a time where well-being is on everyone's mind at school, and there's going to be a lot of money spent on well-being programs, and we believe ours would be most effective, right? So to be in the running for that, we need to have this sort of base.
yeah.
What about the word achievement? That's the one I use when I teach teachers. Achievement.
Achievement can be measured however the researcher defines it
Yeah,
when you're conducting a study.
right.
Well, maybe that's too broad. I mean, you've got to have some support for the way you're wanting to define it, of course, in the literature. But
I wanted to focus more on competence.
Yeah.
And
But-
I was thinking of the word power. Because because and it's funny, I love this because, and I use the word competence when I teach, but when I'm thinking about something to define, I know that Glasser used the word power and he borrowed that from Deming, correct?
Right.
For yes or no, I don't remember.
From
but
who?
Deming, right? Didn't he?
I don't think so. I think he used the word power before he ever heard of Deming.
To operationalize it, we would need to go into
Yep.
other research and find out how power has been defined. And what I found, it was nothing like what I think Glasser had in mind.
So maybe he defined it. Maybe he's defined it himself.
Right. So that's for me an issue with a lack of alignment for research.
And I love those words that we've used. We've used power with competence and achievement. Anybody else have another word that they use?
One assessment that I like a lot, particularly with children, is the self-concept questionnaire. And it seems to overlap with power and relation because it measures the person's self-concept in 5 different areas. One is like interpersonal relationships, but also how they feel about their academic performance in school, relationships. Their even covers like physical appearance, how they feel about themselves there, also their intellectual abilities. So I see it covering a lot of different areas, and it's really easy to score, and find it helpful with young people struggling with self-esteem.
I was going to say self-esteem and self-worth are also.
Yeah.
concepts that fit
Mhm.
and might be more acceptable to in the
Yeah.
academic world. I mean, self-esteem has been around a long time.
And Quentin came up with another one in the chat, so I think it's really good. A couple people are in the chat having their definitions too, and I think this is a great contribution to how we can come up with a definition, like you said, to operationalize it. I think, Scott, this is a great place to be, you know, to start with that.
Another, what about internal locus or locus control? Could that be another operationalized
Good.
term?
From my understanding, the easiest way, not necessarily the best, is to look at other instruments and see what's already been done in that, and see if one of those definitions really meet our needs. And I don't think any one individual could say that it does that. It would take a specific dedicated, I think, committee to look at that, because I think we're all going to have a little bit different take on it.
Yeah.
So one way to maybe get started is for us to focus on, you know, one of the needs, maybe power is it to start with, and to find the best operational term that already exists.
Well, that could be your dissertation, Scott.
My dissertation is complete.
I was afraid you might say that.
There's somebody here.
There'll be
will
a lot
want
of
to
young
do-
faces out there, though.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people in this room, and somebody has to do some work. And so we'll help you. We'll all come together and work on that, because I think it's a great topic. And I think it's good. There's a lot of things in the chat. Bob and Willa, if you would look at the chat and see if there's some questions that you could answer. Or it's just some interesting things.
I think it's looking very interesting, and thank you for all the
Yeah.
input, folks.
Yeah,
That's great. Yeah, instruments actually came up from Quentin Hunter. Am I saying that correctly? Thank you. We were just talking about that. And the scope of reality therapy in an action research, and what would be a few limitations. I don't know. I've got, would anybody like to comment on that in terms of action research?
I'd like to ask I know this is a term we use. What do you mean by the scope of reality therapy? Dr. Veena.
This is hi, I'm Dr. Veena from India. This is almost night for us, and good morning, one and all present there. Sir, I would like to know, like, what are the scopes? I mean, how we could implement reality therapy in action research? Like, how? I mean, what would be the time limit? Is there any guidelines for that? How we could take this reality therapy, and what would be the limitations to carry out?
Bob, would you like me to try?
Wow, go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
tough question.
I think one of the difficulties we've had with large-scale research for reality therapy is that many practitioners are individual practitioners, and so they have their own client caseload. We don't have a way of systematically obtaining participants in research from multiple practitioners, though. And so ideally, we'd want to be following client outcomes for probably at least 15 people whose therapists are taking the reality therapy approach, and then possibly comparing those outcomes to either a wait list of clients if it's a large institution, or it can also be compared if you've got other practitioners who are using, say, CBT or a different approach. and you can compare those two approaches. And for example, if we use something like CBT as a comparison, it has a very large body of research supporting it. So if reality therapy matched or exceeded those outcomes with the comparison group with CBT, that would be positive and something that would be very publishable. I don't know now if that answer actually addresses what you were asking, Dr. Veena.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to know if there are any guidelines, like how many, how many sessions can we take up, and what would be the group participants to whom we could like administer this reality therapy? Are there any specific guidelines or to do this action research?
My understanding is reality therapy can be used with any clients. And Bob, please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I think it can be used with anybody. It doesn't guarantee a result, but then nothing, it's unethical to guarantee a result, but certainly it started in a mental hospital, and then it was applied in a correctional institution, and those two institutions usually are populated with very disturbed people. Only later did it extend to schools and teachers talking to the kids using reality therapy, and then to private practice and so on. So I have not personally found an individual that it does not apply to. Now, there may be people, and I've referred people who want a more psychodynamic approach, and that's a situation where I have personally referred people to therapists who are more psychodynamic. So I think we have to take into consideration what the client wants and what the system wants. And but it can certainly apply to anybody.
In terms of number of sessions and so forth, I don't think you can say that there's a manualized approach to an exact number of sessions. Now, Bob, your reality therapy for the 21st century, as I remember, really did try to provide a more structured approach for the therapy, and might be used perhaps as a guideline if somebody was trying to structure a research study. But Dr. Veena, again, I'm not sure if that's a on-target answer for you.
Well, it can be used. I mean, I've talked to people for years, not every week, but for off and on, but mostly it's short term because we aim at improvement rather than cure, and as do all systems nowadays. And so if we can, some people want to get the cure, and some people want to get a tool, and I usually just say, well, I don't know about cures, but I know about improvements. And when you get on that road of improvement, you're more likely to satisfy those 5 needs far more effectively. And it's like recovery from an addiction. You never really recover. You're always in recovery. So it's kind of the same thing. But people want a number, so I give them a number. I say 10 sessions, but don't take that too seriously.
And I do 12 because EAP is 12 sessions.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I do 12. We have about 2 minutes to wrap up if there's any other questions.
Thanks for answering that, both of you. Thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you for your
Thank
input.
you. Thank you, Bob and Villa. I want to say this seemed very special for all of us who are doing CTRT in India, okay? It's an introduction to research.
Thank you.
I just have Jaisameen here who has contributed to the International Journal, and I want to encourage all of them to try and do something for the International Journal. So thank you very much.
And you know, Frida and everyone, if you want and have an idea and you want some support and help, please come to the research committee and tell us what you need. And we'd be more than happy to help you in any way that we can. that's what we function for. We want you to publish. We want you to be successful. So please come to us. We have a meeting usually the last Friday of every month. And so our next meeting will be the end of May. And we'd love to have you. I can think the advertisement for it goes out the week before. So, and you can contact us individually by email if you want to, if you don't know about it. And I really appreciate this. And I want to make you successful. I think that through you out there, it brings choice theory, reality therapy to the world. And was Dr. Glasser's mission. So I want to support his mission.
I can see 2 articles written by Scott and then another one by Dr. Vina. One is on power, just asking the questions. That would be a good article to publish in the journal. And then your title, Dr. Vina, could be, is reality therapy short-term, long-term, or both? And so you got something there if you're interested. And we do have a journal. It's a very nice journal that Tom Parrish edits.
And we post this on the WGI International website. And then the references and the PowerPoint will be posted as well. So you can, and then I'll put Bob and Willa's email.
Yeah.
With their permission, okay.
That's
So that
fine, that's
you
fine.
can write them, yes, and see if you have any questions.
I would like to add, ma'am, that I'm doing my doctorate in reality therapy, and for that I have prepared a structured manual which I'm using like on 100 participants, and I've already done it on 75 participants, and total number of sessions are 12.
Wow. Did you hear that, Willa and Bob? Jasmine, you might have to repeat that.
Round of applause. That's fabulous.
I know.
That's wonderful. We have a randomized controlled study happening.
How
There we
about
go.
that? If anybody writes a manual, please don't make it this thick. This is the manual for the Veterans Administration post-traumatic stress. How about that? I attended some training on that, and it's very detailed.
Jasmine,
Thanks,
if you need anything, let us know, okay? And I thank all of you for attending today. And again, if you have any questions, please, you're welcome to email us. And this will be posted on the website, at least in a couple of weeks anyway. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Willa. You are tremendous and brilliant, and we learn from you every day. So thank you very much.
Thank
you,
you all
everyone.
for coming. Thanks
Bye.
for inviting us into your country and into your rooms. And the best to everyone, especially people in India. I hope the situation improves there. It's so
Bless you.
well, I
Yeah.
can't say anything.
Oh, yes. Thank you, everybody.
you.
It's
Thank you.
been a
Thank you,
pleasure
Dr.
and honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna and Bob. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye, Farida and everyone.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
being
Thank you,
here.
everyone.
Bye.
Great seeing you all.
Bye.
Bye.